8.
You rolled an 8. The design challenge we will be taking upon ourselves today is make the coolest boat.
Ooh.
Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rao.
And this week we have a guest, Nate B. Hey, Nate.
Hi. Thanks
really
for having me.
Good to have you here.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for agreeing to this.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm super excited about the topic, and we'll get to that eventually. But I want to know just a little bit about you. What kind of games do you run?
Right now, I am running a sort of West Marches style 5e game.
Ooh. Oh, cool.
Yeah, with a bunch of old college friends mixed with some of my newer friends that all sort of coalesced during the pandemic virtually, people across the country, and it's been a hoot.
That's super fun. Yeah, so I mean, you said West Marches. I guess how do you have like a core crew, and then other people kind of filter in here and there, or
it's almost West Marches, right? I don't think it quite hits all the marks of West Marches, but it's pretty close. We have the same group of people. Sometimes people show up, sometimes people can't show up. And we have multiple teams that we run, so we have some higher level. We have a higher level group that's been going since the beginning. Sometimes people will duck out. We started a B team. Other people ducked out. We started a C team.
Wow.
So we just keep adding teams, starting them at first level for that sort of character funnel. Yeah, it's been fun.
That's super great. And then you've let us know that you actually try very hard to, I'm going to say like be mean, but that's not what I mean. Like you try to kill characters, right?
Well, in this particular case, I've taken on my own character as the DM, and that sort of classic killer DM, where I chant fumble during clutch moments, and am generally antagonistic with a huge amount of love. Like obviously, the whole thing is just a silly joke, but we've enjoyed it. It's a fun dynamic. I mean, people need levity right now, so
yeah, right. Especially
it's not my last. My last game before this one was fairly grimdark, so it was a nice juxtaposition. Well,
what was the role-playing game that kind of got you into the hobby?
Oh boy, I think. Well, it was D&D. It was in the early 80s, and I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old. And I got up one Easter morning, expecting stale jelly beans and waxy chocolate rabbits. And instead, I came downstairs, and my Easter basket was full of the magenta box set.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
Yeah, that exploded my brain and changed my life. It was awesome.
Well, it's always delightful to have someone on the show who is also playing kind of in the 80s. I feel awfully old sometimes chatting with Chris and some of the other guests I have, but
yes, yeah.
I have fond memories of those times. That's cool. So are there any other role-playing games besides D&D that kind of stand out to you in your memory as formative experiences or really great memories?
Lots of second edition in college. I have fond memories of playing Rifts just because it was so bonkers. All Flesh Must Be Eaten. I had a really fun campaign sort of right before pop culture exploded around everything zombie. So I just kind of hit it just right as the interest was there, and there were smaller projects that were popping up everywhere, but before it sort of got overwhelming.
Yeah.
And everybody was really on board. It was super exciting, and one of the few campaigns that just really had like a nice arc and a satisfying cinematic ending. That's such a rare thing to actually have a game end like that.
Yeah.
Rather than just sort of disappear or implode.
Yeah.
That's
Are
awesome.
any of the people that played in that game playing in your current game?
No, not at the moment. That was sort of a intermediate group of friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These are sort of like my bookend friends, my very old school friends and my very new school friends coming together.
Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, like how different friend groups coalesce around different games that you play. Yeah, like I just finished playing in a short campaign of the One Ring where we were all hobbits. This is we called it the Bumbling Hobbits campaign. But yeah, it was the people that were in that game were just like delightful, right? Like we don't really hang out that much outside of gaming here and there, but like it came together and everybody was super into playing this style of game. It was very fun.
That's awesome.
Before we get to the design challenge, which I'm very curious what's going to come out of our coolest boat idea.
Yeah.
But We have a new experience here on the podcast because, guys, the other day I was sitting out on my porch, kind of gazing out across the farm. It was the end of a long day, like I just come in from milking the cows or whatever. I guess you probably don't do that at the end of the day. I don't actually know.
Yeah, it's
anyway,
very clear that you do not have a farm.
Yeah, I'm sitting on my my Iowan farm, the front porch, and the mailman comes sauntering up, whistling a merry tune, and he's got his mail bags full of packages and letters, and he's handing me my mail. And then as he does so, he's like, well, wait a sec here. I think I got one more thing in here. And he reached in and he pulled out a letter addressed to Roll for Topic.
Wow.
So I said, yes, sir, that's me. Hand that right over. So we have a listener question that I'm going to spring on you guys, and we're going to take a couple minutes to discuss just as soon as I dramatically open this resemblance.
That is a terrible sound.
Okay. All right. Here is our listener question. Dear Roll for Topic. This is from a listener, Nick. I have a player who always wants to play some powerful noble character like a duke or a king, which seems too powerful for the level 1 campaign I was planning to run. I'm his only outlet to role-playing games, so even if I don't want him in this particular game, he'll seek me out to play. What should I do? Is he just inexperienced? Am I just inexperienced? And then sign Nick. I am going to toss this out to you, Chris, first. Let's not do super long answers, but I want to hear kind of your gut reaction to this question.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks, Nick, for writing in. Yeah, I think my gut reaction to this is that, there's probably nothing wrong with them playing that style of character, but you need to talk with them about, how to integrate that into the story that you're trying to tell. And also make sure that, them being this, noble character is not the most interesting thing that can ever happen to them in the game that you're playing. If the most interesting thing that's ever going to happen to the character has already happened before you started playing, then it's not going to be a fun story. So there has to be somewhere for that character to go. And I would just want to sit down with the player and just sort of define that a little bit and see sort of what they actually want out of the campaign with this style of character. Because otherwise it's just well, okay, so you're super awesome. Where do you go from there? So that's my gut reaction.
Nate, how would you answer our listener?
Oh boy. Well, I don't want to read too much into the question, but it sounds a little bit like maybe there's more to it. Maybe this person is also a bit disruptive. That style of sort of power play, spotlight focus. Sometimes I've noticed in the past comes along with people that are maybe not necessarily that much fun to play with. Hopefully that's not the case, but if it is, if that person is no fun and is no fun for the other people that you're playing with, then really confrontation is hard, but maybe you shouldn't play with that person. That's hard, that's dealing with people is the hardest part, right?
It's a really good point, though, because that's the sort of thing. If you know it's going to be a confrontational experience sitting down at the table every time, it's go ahead and have that confrontation beforehand, right? Just do it, save everybody sort of the trouble. Because otherwise, right, you're just going to not enjoy playing, and the campaign will fade off into nothingness.
Yeah, those are good points. When I think about this, I have kind of two different instincts. One is to try and figure out, okay, how can we get a Duke or a King character into a level 1 campaign in a way that's fun? And that's one way I want to answer. And the other way I want to answer is more of Nate's approach, which is let's not try to solve this necessarily with an in-game solution. Let's have an out-of-game conversation. Why do you want to play this character? What is the experience you hope to get out of playing this character? And, maybe that conversation might have to end with deciding, this is not the right game for you to be playing in. Or maybe that conversation will result in what you want is this kind of experience. I can't have you be a king in my campaign, but maybe we can do something else to let you, maybe you just like the backstory element that you're a king. Well, is there a way we can have you somehow exiled from your throne or something like that and give you a reason to be adventuring around with these other level ones? My own experience is that in-game solutions to problems that are player problems, not in-game problems, they don't really work very well. And you end up having to have the awkward conversation anyway.
I wonder if like maybe one approach to figuring out what's going on is to say like, okay, cool, you can be a king, but everybody else also gets to be a king. Like, right? It's like, yeah. And if you're not okay with that, then that kind of gives you your answer. But maybe it's just like, well, I want to play Knights of the Round Table, right? Like I want everybody to be super awesome in their own regard. It's like, okay, yeah, like then you could work with that. But I suspect, right, there might be elements of this is just going to be a painful experience unless there's a good conversation that happens beforehand.
Right.
I know it's hard to talk about because it's not a bad thing if you're not the right player for the right game. You know, it can feel personal when you're having that confrontational conversation. It can make you feel bad to tell someone you're not a good fit for this game. But, you know, you really are not condemning or judging that person, you know, unless they're being completely outrageous in some way. You know, it's... Some people just want different things out of the games than other people do, and it's not always going to fit. I don't want to like name and shame anyone here or whatever, but have you as GMs had a situation like this where what a player wanted was really clashing with what you had intended the campaign to be?
Yeah, that is tricky, right? Because I think like, yeah, we don't want to name and shame.
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely had like, I wouldn't say an entire character's whole thing being clashing, but like maybe like elements of it where it's just like, oh, there's some friction here that I need to sort out. When that happens, I mean, I always wish I was more direct about it. Like, this is not compatible with the sort of game we're, you know, having. But I think, Andy, like you mentioned, I think my instinct, and probably everybody's instinct, is sort of to try to approach it in game in some way. That can often come across as like railroading in the bad sense, or like nerfing someone's character, or like, yeah, seeming like combative in a way that like you're not doing to other characters at the table. So I mean, I think you have to tread lightly, and I think that is a good opportunity. I think when you're finding yourself being like wanting to misapply the rules or apply the rules in a different way to different characters, that's probably when you need to take a step back and be like, okay, like what's really going on?
Yeah, I haven't really had this experience too much as GM, but I've been a player in numerous games where there was somebody in the group that seemed to be just clashing with the tone and style of the game. And the one time that it ended really happily was in a science fiction game with someone who really wanted to be playing a much more kind of detail-focused, super tactically focused game than the rest of the group wanted to play. And that ended happily because the game system had enough complexities in it that the GM was able to say, all right, nobody else cares about this level of detail, but you do. So you're in charge of the ship. So between game sessions, you spend as much time as you want. He would come to game sessions with a spreadsheet of like all the different parts on the ship and the different pieces and components on the ship. And then the GM honored that interest of his by whenever there was a question that the GM might normally have kind of fudged in the interest of story that had to do with this person's area of expertise, the spaceship, the GM would just toss the question to the player. So are we in range? Are we close enough that our short range sensors can pick this up? Well, I don't know. Joe, what's the sensor capacity of our ship? And then he would consult a spreadsheet or actually just answer from memory. And then, and then that's great. That's a playable fact. And then the game can keep on rolling. It was an in-game solution, but it required an out-of-game conversation to say, this is what you want, and it's different from what everyone else wants, but we'll try and create an experience within our game that will be fun for you and not disruptive for the others. So, any closing comments on that before we kind of move on to our design challenge?
I don't think so. Yeah, other than just, thanks for writing in. We really appreciate, hearing from people just in general who are listening, but then, having specific questions like that is just, it's great.
Yeah.
We like answering those.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, Nick, for writing in. We really appreciate it. So, all right. Hey, without further ado, let us turn our focus to the design challenge, which I shall remind you was make the coolest boat. It's like it's very specific and really open-ended and vague at the same time somehow. So
I need to admit, a lot of the design challenges, just because we just started this up recently, were ones that Andy and I created together. So we put together a list of our design challenges that we had here. I went in, I think today, and added the word coolest to this design challenge. Because I was thinking about it, and it's like, like make a boat, I think was the original one. I'm like, that's fine and everything, but like let's make the coolest boat. So I think we're gonna do our traditional thing, which is define our genre that we want to play in, and then kind of take it from there. So, Nate, maybe I'll ask you, is there anything that you've been thinking about lately, like genre-wise? You know, like maybe let's stick like outside of D&D high fantasy.
Ooh, boy. I mean, I have been playing a bit of Morkborg here and there.
Ooh, okay.
So that might change it to the most metal boat.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. Metal is cool on this podcast.
Yeah. I like that. Let's see. I mean, yeah, do you want to say like the most metal boat? I mean, like, well, submarine, there you go. But like, you know,
what if it's just a open-ended fantasy boat? So it's not like a spacecraft or something like that, but like a boat that could appear in a fantasy campaign, maybe a particularly open-ended fantasy campaign.
Okay, I like the metal thing is making me think that maybe this boat is for like the big bad, right?
Oh, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, so is this a bad boat or a good boat? And I'm gonna say that boats can have alignment.
When this came up, I immediately thought of the Michael Moorcock Elric story, where Elric gets a pretty metal boat, and that boat is like an artifact or something that he gets by negotiating with a deity, and that boat went across sea and land. But I don't think it hovered over the land. It like plowed through.
It just went through it.
The land as if it were water. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That boat was cool because of what it did. But I think the boat itself sounded, pretty regular boat looking. But
yeah,
that was a very long-winded way to answer your question. I like the idea of the boat as a sort of like a unique artifact created. Bad or good, we can decide. But I like that it was made either for a specific purpose or to cater to somebody's very specific like design needs or desires.
Okay, so if it can go, let's assume it can go on water. Like, let's assume like it can do basic boat things. Nate, like, what's one other thing you'd want the coolest boat to be able to do?
Ooh, I mean, I think it, like you said, a submarine. I think it should be able to go underwater as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. How does it go underwater? Does it just like magically go underwater? Does it transform before it can go underwater?
I mean, I feel like part of this boat should be organic in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that aspect of the boat
Is the whole thing alive?
Maybe
the boat has to hold its breath like when it goes underwater. So I like some sort of transformation just because I see some dramatic possibilities in that.
Okay.
Like some kind of process or transformation it has to undergo to move from like underwater mode to surface mode.
What if it was alive? The boat used to be some other being and like was transformed into the boat.
Oh.
Yeah. So like, I mean, maybe like the elements of its personality and stuff are represented on the boat in some fashion.
Thinking about the classic, what is it? The classic Dr. Dolittle. Weren't they inside like a Nautilus that they traveled inside?
Oh, and then there's also like James and the Giant Peach, right?
Right.
The Giant Peach was a boat. Technically a boat.
What if it was mostly mechanical for one of its modes and the organic part of it like took over or became prominent when it went to the other mode? I don't know, like it's a regular boat, but when it needs to go underwater, a creature comes out and encompasses the boat and pulls it underwater or something. I don't know. I'm making this up on the fly.
Sure. Yeah, so maybe it's like a bit like an iceberg, right? So you're seeing the boat, but really what lies underneath the boat is this creature, and when it's time to go underwater, something comes up and envelops the boat from beneath and then pulls it down. So maybe the boat sits on top of some sort of giant jellyfish.
Yeah.
Or manta, or maybe a manta ray, and the wings curl up and envelop the boat.
Oh, I like that.
I like that. And then maybe envelop it with like an air pocket for the crew or something.
Yeah. I think I like jellyfish, right? So like because jellyfish don't make any sense, right? Like they're terrifying,
right?
Yeah, but I mean, you could kind of easily see them sort of like folding inside out and like going
sealing,
up and
yeah, sort of sealing up.
Is it jellyfish or like Portuguese manivores? What are like the floating things with like really long tendrils that hang?
Yeah,
below?
I think those are manivores. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what if it's something like that? The creature itself doesn't need to be that big, but it's got these tendrils that drop way down, maybe even dragging on the floor of the body of water, depending on how deep it is.
What if it's just actually walking along the bottom and like it's pulling it along? So like there's no sails or anything.
Oh my goodness.
It's just this like classic looking ship with no sails that like somehow can move and like stop and like rotate and kind of go wherever it wants to.
I actually really like that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, and like if the waves are really going, the waves just sort of go and it just like stays in air as the waves are like crashing underneath it. Stuff because like the jellyfish is just holding it up.
Right, like a buoy.
Yeah, imagine you're going into battle with it, against it, and it's just moving in ways that make no sense given the waves and the wind, because you don't know it's being propelled by something underneath the surface. These are all fantastic ideas. Does anyone want to kind of make an executive decision here about what the nature of the boat is here?
I think this is good. Yeah, I think that the executive decision is we should define the jellyfish a little bit more, but there's some sort of jellyfish man-o-war that is carrying this like boat shell on top of it. Like, how big is the boat? Is it a like cruise liner size boat? Is it like a dinghy? Like what?
My instinctive reaction is, it's kind of a medium-sized boat, something that a party of PCs could plausibly crew with some henchmen, It's a very different kind of boat if it's like an aircraft carrier with thousands of people on it, which is also cool. So, I don't know, you guys, what do you guys think?
I mean, I'm drawn to the aircraft carrier just because I think that sort of short circuits my brain a little bit, because I think I'm also thinking standard boat with 10-person crew. Yeah. So I mean, if you go like aircraft carrier or floating barge, like there's a sense of scale to that's really cool to me.
Well, it changes in a good way from being just a vehicle or mode of transport for the PCs to being a location where entire adventures could take place just within the context of the boat.
It could be an entire city, not just a boat, but and that might explain, because it probably wouldn't move terribly fast, so that might sort of balance that out if it's a city and that it just sort of meanders.
Going back to the metal thing, like what if it's like a floating like rock concert or something? Like I'm thinking like what would the parties see? Like so they're out in some sort of storm, and then all of a sudden this city is just sort of like moving through the storm coming at them.
Right.
Like what would be the most terrifying thing for them to see?
Oh, a lot of bioluminescence for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And maybe they don't see the jellyfish, but they do see some of the tendrils which come up and sort of curl around like city lights, like a light show.
Yeah.
Bioluminescent light show.
So who lives on this boat? If it's kind of a city, is it an intentional city and they are steering it around the ocean for their purposes? Is the creature in charge of its own movement, and maybe the city is just composed of everybody that crashed into it and survived and swam over to it or something? Like who's on this boat?
Yeah, I think it's not intentional. Yeah, it's not intentional in that like you can't like, I don't know, buy and sell real estate on it, right? Like it's not like that sort of city, but I think it's got to have some sort of other hook, right? Like whether it is like you were saying, people who've crashed on this thing and just sort of like they're the ones who survived, or it's ghosts, or it's some other deep sea creature.
Yeah, I like that. The idea that ships would run aground on this gelatinous mass and they just get slowly absorbed into it.
Yeah.
And then perhaps even the people to some degree could get absorbed in, and so then maybe it's almost like a hive mind, or there's some sort of telepathic connection once you sort of get absorbed.
Would people who like didn't get absorbed, who are like up on top, like worship the thing, like, right? Because like, so there's a hive mind, right? It's probably talking and I don't know, talking and screaming and all that sort of stuff. But like maybe there's people who are on top that like worship and take care of the thing. I mean, now we're getting to like design a cool cult, but right? Like, yeah.
Well, I think if given its scale, you could have a couple of different factions to make for some good drama. You could have a faction of kind of caretakers who kind of tend to it. Maybe they actually are kind of the symbiotic sea creatures that live with this thing, or maybe they're just a faction of people that washed up and decided to care for it. And then you could maybe have some people that have gone overboard in a metaphorical sense and are worshipping it, like you say, like a cult. And then maybe there's another group that doesn't consider it mystical or anything. It's just they're trying to figure out how to control it. You could have quite a few different approaches represented by different factions or individuals.
Yeah. Oh, I like all that. Maybe just to like, I mean, ground it, like ground it a little bit. Like, what if there are a lot of creatures sort of like this, right? So there's a lot of jellyfish sort of like this, and there's just some sort of natural like thing on its head that sort of looks like a boat, right? And so this is how it all started.
Okay.
Right? So there's like a lot of these like small versions of it sort of going around. But this one, for whatever reason, someone's like, oh, I'm going to try to ride that thing, but then accidentally fell and got kind of like subsumed into into the jellyfish. And it just sort of like, you know, like you were saying, Nate, it just sort of like, as time went on, more and more stuff glommed onto it. So at the center of it, there's still like a boat, but there's also just like all this other stuff, broken boats that are sort of attached, what have you. Probably the people who live on top of it that are worshiping it are also trying to like gather more materials and stuff. Was there I feel like in Elric, this might have also been an Elric thing. There were boats that were essentially just giant pyramids.
Yes,
that floated around.
The boats of his native people are giant golden pyramids, I think.
Okay, and now we're all gonna have to try to say Melnibodeans.
Yes, I specifically was trying to avoid having to try and pronounce that and embarrass myself.
Yeah.
Is the giant jellyfish? Is it alive? So I was like, one metal approach is it's like it's undead and powered by unholy energies that at least one of the factions is responsible for keeping flowing.
I think undead.
Okay.
What do you think, Nate? Undead jellyfish.
What keeps it moving? What runs the jellyfish?
So maybe there are vents at the bottom of the sea that open up into another plane, or maybe the abyss, and so that the jellyfish is constantly pulling itself along, trying to get those tendrils and get that nasty abyssal energy.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe this is something the players could figure out later. Like, is it filtering out like abyssal energy from other planes as it's moving along? So it's like if you accidentally kill this thing, you actually it's been keeping something much worse at bay.
Wow, so it's like the fish in the fish tank that eats the algae off the sides.
Yeah. It's been keeping back all the kaiju from erupting from.
That's awesome.
Can you control it, right? Or like, is it uncontrolled? I guess, did we decide that? I mean, there's not going to be like a steering wheel on it, right? But like, could you maneuver it?
I think it's too good of a plot to pass up that like a bad guy is trying to unlock the secret to controlling it and using it for their nefarious purposes. So my instinct is to say that it's kind of just moving around by instinct, just pulled to the next cluster of abyssal energy or whatever it is. But that at least, one or more factions is hard at work trying to figure out how to get control of it.
What if this one is not the only one, but this is the outlier undead version? And there are more versions of this with other sort of towns on them that sort of glom together like every mating season to become like a city, and then the people trade and then come apart, and then this is sort of the strange undead zombie version that's been corrupted.
Oh, I like that a lot. This is like Waterworld if it was good,
right? This is sort of spiraling out into like campaign fodder.
World
building.
I guess so one thing I'm struggling with is, so if these are not controllable like easily, does it still fit that definition of a boat? I mean, like we're pretty far afield from like what a boat is, but I feel like there's got to be some core elements to, like, I don't know, you could identify this as a boat that we should stick with.
Okay, sure.
And what would the characters get out of it? What would they, what would appeal to them?
Yeah, I mean, you could like a simple way. I mean, I think I would drop this into campaign. Like, if you wanted this not to be the whole campaign, there is some sort of like cross-oceanic journey they need to take. And it's like, well, you can either take a boat, right? And that's going to take you a couple months and it might, like you might crash and die and stuff. Or you can take the unholy jellyfish boat. It'll get you there a lot faster, and there's only a little bit of abyssal energy you need to deal with.
What if there's something on the surface of the ocean where it would be beneficial if you needed to go under it periodically, if that greatly sped up or simplified your across the ocean journey? Maybe there's like big gigantic beds of dangerous kelp or seaweed type stuff on the surface, and it's really, really difficult to navigate it only on the surface. But if you could occasionally submerge and go under, you could save a lot of time.
Yeah, or there's just like, a ton of storms out in the middle, or some wizard has frozen the ocean.
Yeah.
in parts.
Yeah, fill in your catastrophe, I guess.
I'm wondering too, like, so if it can go underwater, it does beg the question to like what other stuff you could find underwater too. It's like, yeah, so if you take your boat across the ocean, you just roll a d20 a couple times to see if you make it. But if you go underwater, like maybe there's an underwater city they can see, like there's a leviathan they can hunt, like all sorts of fun stuff can be.
You're right that it probably does need to be kind of controllable. I wonder if control is just difficult, like if it's difficult to keep it from drifting off course towards the nearest abyssal energy concentration. It isn't too hard to get it moving where you want it to go, and to trigger it to submerge when you want. But there would be plenty of opportunity for the GM to throw in a complication. Like it's decided it's just being stubborn today, it's moving in the wrong direction, or somebody else on the boat is trying to countermand the order you're giving it, that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's like a horse or something.
Yeah, I could definitely see this in a fantasy setting where there would be, using magic as sort of the carrot to lead it, right?
Yeah.
Sort of casting spells or opening up rifts in the plane to just sort of draw it forward.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Maybe it takes like 12 wizards to keep it in a straight line.
Yeah.
And guess what? One of the wizards just died. Right. Yeah.
So what are some plot ideas that could kick off an adventure where you would encounter this boat?
I mean, I think I liked we talked about, there's some sort of storm at sea, and that's the first sighting of it. I mean, I think you could have some good rumors, right? Like just rumors of this thing, people who, like maybe there's one person who got off and swam to shore.
Yeah, or you could just, sneak it up on them. Like they just wake up one morning and they think they're in the doldrums. They're not moving properly. They don't know what's going on. And so there's a bit of investigation, to find out that they've just sort of hit the very tip of this thing, and it's sort of keeping them in place. So it seems very innocent, strange but innocent, till they investigate.
Maybe in the same way that we know there are giant squids because occasionally pieces of them wash up on shore, but that we can't easily go out and spot them. Maybe we know these creatures exist because here's this giant dead one, and maybe the plot is to try and find that mythical, like that annual joining together that Nate described, or something like that.
It's good.
And it occurs to me, you could scale this up or down. I think this could work well with like a 100-person crew or with a 2,000-person crew, depending on whether you wanted it to be more like a floating city or more like a boat.
I mean, heck, you could even do like a canoe-size version of this, I think, and that would also be pretty cool to run across, right? Like the same, with all the same other stats and stuff that we've talked about. It's like, yeah, I mean, if that's all your campaign calls for.
All right, well, anything to add here, or have we created our coolest boat? Is this the coolest boat? Is there something that in your heart of hearts would make this boat cooler that you have been scared to share with the rest of us in this conversation? So now it's time to come out with what you really actually think would make this boat cooler.
Yeah, I think it'd be cooler if it was a giant skull with like the top part of it cut off.
I was going to say the exact same thing. We did say metal, and there needs to be skulls. I mean, yeah.
Well, maybe it's like a hermit crab, and it's picked up like a titan skull somewhere, and so it is just literally rolling with this giant skull sitting on top of it.
That's perfect. Yeah, it's a jellyfish. It's gone inside the skull as like armor or something.
Yeah, what if you just see a skull like floating across the surface of the ocean? That's cool. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, like sucking in abyssal energy through like its eye sockets.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect place to end.
I think so. I don't know how we're going to really come up with something cooler than that.
That was super fun. Yeah, thanks, Nate, for indulging us on that one. That's a cool boat. Is that so I haven't played Morkborg before. Is that the sort of thing that would slot in there nicely?
I mean, I think you would really have to ratchet up the dark, gloomy, nasty factor, maybe beyond family friendly.
Okay, sure. Yeah, all right.
Depending on your group, but let's make it a little more horrible.
Yeah. All right. Well, use your imaginations. listeners, I suppose, and make it as horrible as you want. We won't judge you. So, hey, before we move on too far, though, we need to replace this design challenge with a new one. So, Nate, I'm wondering, putting you on the spot here a little bit, do you have a design challenge we can add to our table of design challenges to take the place of this one?
Yeah, well, originally I was thinking the challenge could be to create an unusual mode of transportation that the PCs had to master in order to achieve a goal. But I think we might have just done that.
I think we did, yeah.
So I was thinking, create a scenario in which you as a GM use an actual performance to propel the story.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
That's great.
That's a good one. We'll add it in.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Nate, for coming. Yeah, everybody who is listening, yeah, we really appreciate it. As evidenced by the first part of this episode, if you have questions, feel free to send them in. If you have ideas for a design challenge we can add to the table, feel free to contact us. I think our emails are on the website. So you can find that at gmdiscussions.com. Roll for Topic is part of the Roll For It podcasting network. Our sister podcast, The Splat Book, can be found at thesplatbook.com, and that's put out by Kyle Latino and John Corey. We actually had an extra special message for John this week. We just wanted to let him know that there's a new Kickstarter that just came out for a game called Blade Runner. I think it's based on some movie, something like that. But anyway, you can find it on Kickstarter.com. I'm sure if you just go there and search for Blade Runner, it'll pop right up, and then you can go ahead and back it. I have been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
And again, thank you, Nate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.